Welcome Sunday evening, our third installment this evening of our primetime programming on Sunday Night Primetime on KOFO 1220, 103.7 FM, your home and away voice of the Kansas City Royals, as well as your country music giant on the East Central Plains of Kansas. This is Boomer Takes with Pete and Jake. You heard the Jacobson report at the top of the 6 o'clock hour, and it was great to hear from Father Clem with Life is Worth Living. And now we move into this comfy chatter hour here with the great Peter Tinsman, MD, longtime friend of mine. It's just two guys, we're boomers, and we just ruminate on all things from prom safari dresses, you know, that prom dress safari, to why you want to play tennis instead of pickleball, to why Pete lives near alligators and crocodiles outside his Florida house while I chase tornadoes. And we just kind of all over the place here on this great radio net that caroms up to the Capitol of Topeka, where the legislature's trying to finish up. It goes, obviously, to the Kansas City Metro, where just the other night we had a police officer being wounded here in Ottawa with a murder suspect from Kansas City, just 5 blocks from where we are. Fortunately, our police officers recovered fully and got a police escort back to Ottawa, and that situation is abated. But, you know, we put up several news features of late on our KOFO Facebook, and folks, 2/3 of you have viewed the tornado coverage, and we're getting some tremendous resonance with some of these other articles that we have been posting. So thanks to everybody from Franklin, Lynn, Miami, Johnson, Douglas, and Anderson counties for listening in, and our folks in Rock Chalk Jayhawk up in Lawrence, as well as Baldwin City here in Ottawa, carrying out to Osage, Osawatomie, Gardner, Garnett, and Princeton and Paola. Guys, we have a special guest tonight, Dr. Pete Tinsman. I thought I'd bring on another MD. This is Ted Fogarty, Maximus. He is the sole award-winning CARES grant awardee physician during the COVID crisis. And Dr. Fogarty is a recent inductee into the Omaha High School Hall of Fame. And last week, Pete, we did a nice dive with Bill Proct about some of the pros and cons of Roundup and glyphosate. And Pete, remind our folks, you're an MD, retired, but also you've got quite the ag background. Talk a little bit about your ag background, then we'll bring Ted in here.
Yeah, no. My dad and his brother started a liquid fertilizer manufacturing business back in the 1950s, and basically pioneered. There was liquid fertilizer. Prior to that, it was all granular, and sold it throughout the Midwest. And so, you know, obviously applying fertilizers, but also part of their business is, applying, herbicides and pesticides for the farmers. So,
and yet Pete is someone who's very health conscious about. Pete has talked numerous times about all of the the stressors out there, the oxidative stresses, and the necessity to beat those down. And Pete's done a lot of. I think Pete was on a radio show with me, and we had Dr. Was it Dr. Navarro that we had on, Pete? But anyway, I think Pete was listening in. I had one of the.
Yeah, that was right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dr. Fogarty here is Ted, I'll let you introduce yourself. You, among other things, have been an advisor over the years to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our Health and Human Services Secretary. Take it away, Ted.
Yeah, I am his closest advisor between Kansas and Canada, especially from an academic medical standpoint. And I have a similar familial backgrounds in terms of ag medicine type of stuff. I've got multiple farmers on my mom's side and married a farm girl from Chapel, Nebraska. And my uncle Carol Schmidt had a fertilizer business that went under in the 80s because he was so kind in helping everyone in the farm crisis of the 80s that nobody ever paid him back. So he was doing liquid fertilizers type stuff and really innovating, and unfortunately basically lost the family farm, and my dad saved it as an attorney, well schooled in the Nebraska state laws on Homestead Act provisions for bankers to not be able to take farmers' land, and saved the farm that my grandfather, who came from East Prussia, built starting in the 1920s. And so, yeah, there's a lot of crossover in biology between medicine and farming and animal husbandry. And if we're gonna just dive into this whole glyphosate thing, it's obviously it's a big enough deal that Trump, and with Kennedy's acquiescence, decided to set up a national defense, 1950s national defense based executive order to protect the industry from legal interventions and lawsuits that Kennedy has spearheaded before he became HHS director, and basically linking glyphosate to cancer. And that all primarily works on the basis of glyphosate is a specific molecular mimic to glycine, and glycine is 1/3 of glutathione. And people have been listening to me on other shows with John over the last year and a half on KOFO, and I've gone long-winded into the importance of glutathione for every action at some level of thought. All of our thoughts are basically generated from electrons harvested from oxygen in the mitochondria, and glutathione being kind of the translational drivetrain, the transmission, if you will, on a lot of intracellular activities. There's over 144 major pathways that are basically regulated by intracellular glutathione gradients. And so what Stephanie Seneff out at MIT, who's a PhD scientist, bioinformaticist, started working on with Bobby Kennedy Jr. and me and some others in the vaccine safety crowd over 15 years ago, is that it appears that glyphosate is getting incorporated as glycine into collagen, and that's been her focus, is documenting the collagen tensile strength of all of our athletes, and everyone is going down with a greater incorporation of glyphosate into the human food chain.
All right, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Right. So my question is that, I said, so glyphosate's in a lot of things, and you're saying that it's made up of glycine is one portion, correct?
It's a molecular mimic for glycine.
Okay, right, okay. And we're taking, because it's in our food or whatnot, it's been sprayed on corn, beans, cattle eat it, whatnot. And when we consume those animals, or we consume the corn or beans, that sort of thing, so that's then getting into our system. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so my question is that if you went and you did a study, and I've heard about this, I maybe even read it, I don't know how long ago, that if you tested 100 people for metabolites of glyphosate, what % of people would show evidence of having that in their system?
I'm not sure, but I know all of the vaccines, the pediatric live virus vaccines that are grown on bovine fetal serum, have glyphosate in them. They've been tested.
The vaccines have glyphosate within the vial?
Yeah, and it's from the live viruses that are grown on the bovine fetal serum. So it's in the supply chain for vaccines, and I'm not a scholar of sorts in terms of the exact amounts of human beings and how many people have glyphosate incorporated into their bodies, but I would hypothesize that what we've seen over the last 30 to 40 years with a significant increase in clinical medicine is non-alcoholic hepatic steatosis. And
can you tell people what you mean by what that big word just meant, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a growing body of medical literature that's showing more and more people have a metabolic derangement in their liver that is not linked to alcohol, and it's basically fat
So I think
fatty acids accumulate in your liver and cause dysfunction, and that is basically non-alcoholic hepatic steatosis.
Okay, and so
I see it all the time on CTs and ultrasounds. I'm reading at night across the country.
Right, exactly.
Definitely.
And so basically, when somebody goes to the doctor, and we're seeing a lot of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is what people be told. So is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. And
Fatty liver disease okay, and so
I would hypothesize that it's probably in part related to the increased glyphosate in our diet in America.
and so there are some people that think it's just because of the way we eat, a lot of sugar load, elevated insulin levels, blah blah blah, elevated fasting blood sugars are leading to this fatty liver disease. But you believe it's more than just, hey, I've been eating too many donuts and I haven't been eating healthy enough. It's the fact that glyphosate's kind of infiltrated things. Is that correct?
Dr. Pete, the flour for those donuts has a lot of glyphosate in it.
Okay. So that's
and there's been a horrible off-label use of glyphosate, especially in wheat country, which is all from basically north and south of me into Canada, where these, especially in the northern plains and southern Canada, these guys are on a timeline to get their crops out, and so they dessicate at the last minute with Roundup.
Right. So they're spraying that Roundup 2 to 3 weeks before it's harvested to dry it up, speed things along. Okay.
And then Bobby Kennedy Jr., all of his court cases and all of this other relationship to him and his legal career goes into the lies from Monsanto to the regulators, where they know for a fact in all of these emails that this is causing problems. That glyphosate is not as isolated to just plant life, disruption of the shiitake pathway, which only exists in plants. But molecular mimicry exists all over the place for all sorts of species of God above, and so it's only common sense to realize that this molecule that actually structurally looks like glycine is going to start getting incorporated in proteins that contain glycine, which collagen has 1/3 of its residues are glycine.
Okay, and certainly all that makes sense, and you kind of hear that, a lot of our problem and our disease is due to sugar. Okay, and our problems are due to sugar. And so this is another take. And when we were talking to Bill Proct,
here's another
and
thing.
Bill was saying, the EPA stated that they haven't found any evidence that it does cause problem. So, me personally, I think, okay, that's one side of the story. And that's why I was thinking, hey, I think I think it's really good to hear all sides of this to try to get, because I don't think we hear the truth completely.
Well, of course, the EPA is another captured regulatory agency.
Absolutely.
It's like you can't really trust anybody in D.C. and any of these three-letter agencies anyway. But, I can produce for you if you want, after the show, I can give you all this research out of the literature. But it's one of those things that, look at all of the problems in American health that don't exist in other nation states they certainly have affluent people, but they don't have as much of penetration of Roundup ready crops in their world, in their ag world. And so you start to look at just cross-cultural studies and different feedstock for people in the entire world, and you can actually ledger metabolic disorders against that. And of course, look back, Pete, when you were in grade school and John was in grade school, Harvard was basically promoting all sorts of about oils being horrible for you, and you got to be on a carbohydrate, sugar-based diet, and even there. Now I'm going to pull this now back into the Midwest grain belt high fructose corn syrup world. So how much high fructose corn syrup is actually replacing traditional sugarcane sugar, and how much of that is tainted with glyphosate?
Oh no, and I'm not. I don't argue at all. That's not even one of my wife. There's this was a number of years ago, we literally went through the cabinet and we threw away, and this had to have been at least 10 years ago, maybe 15. We threw away everything that had high fructose corn syrup. And we try to buy, if it's been sweetened, it better be sweetened with sugar and not be sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, was our theory.
Yeah. And there is a certain amount of mercury that gets into the high fructose corn syrup supply chain as well. And I'm not sure how that works, but it might be from fungicide application to the corn itself. Because, there's mercury in those compounds.
Okay.
And so anyway, it's one of those things we're as an industrial society with huge industrial agricultural needs to feed the world and to feed ourselves. I mean, I completely understand why Trump did this executive order, but it's also slowing down the reform movement for making America healthy again.
Here with Dr. Ted Fogarty, Pete Tinsman, MD, part of Boomer Takes with Pete and Jake. Dr. Fogarty, 2 quick follow-up questions for our audience. You were the only physician to win the federal CARES grant during COVID. How did you get recognized for your work there, A? And then B, you wrote a seminal paper on some lead poisoning related to hunting in the Midwest. While we're on this topic, let's talk, and all 3 of us with an Omaha Nexus connection. Omaha had a huge lead issue in its own industrial.
So I convinced the ag commissioner in North Dakota, Doug Gehring, who was the chieftain in charge of the leftover funds from the $15 million that North Dakota got as a state for CARES Act grant. And then, Doug Burgum, who's Bill Gates' best friend, he spent like $5 million of that on upgrading the Teddy Roosevelt Memorial Center out in western North Dakota, and spent nothing of that $5 million on actually taking care of COVID, which is what those funds were supposed to be doing.
Excuse me, Doug Burgum was really good friends with Bill Gates?
Yeah, Doug Burgum and Bill Gates have been friends for a long time. Doug Burgum started Great Plains Software in the late 1980s and early 1990s and created this portfolio of software for businesses that then he sold into Microsoft for $1 billion, and then he went straight to Redmond, Washington, and was working with Bill Gates for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, and then came back to Fargo, North Dakota, and started to do some real estate stuff, and then decided to run for governor. And his biggest donor was, of course, Bill Gates. And during the COVID crisis in 2020, Bill Gates and Doug Burgum showed up at the Alfalfa Club meeting in January of 2020 to it's a very secretive private group of the top billionaires in the country that has met every year since the 1920s. And that was at Jeff Bezos' place, and Trump wasn't invited. And it was kind of, in my opinion, as a little bit of a, not Central Intelligence Agent, not CIA, but Price Intelligence Agency observation that there was some sort of thing going on to get Trump out of office right then, with all of the tech billionaires, and then some generals who were very anti-Trump were all there. Anyway, long story short, Doug Burgum, who actually announced his presidency candidacy in Nevada, Iowa, not in his own.
Yeah, he did exactly.
Not in his own home state, was basically trying to pull off kind of this trifecta of bringing all this carbon pipeline from Iowa out to North Dakota for the fracking in the Bakken. And I'm also one of the petroleum engineering faculty members at UND. And so, I'm just here to say I'm kind of a medical spy of all of this fraudulent political activity. And so when I say that Doug Burgum is going to spend a long time in purgatory with Bill Gates, I'm pretty sure Christ is right behind me on that.
Dr. Fogarty?
And yet he's Secretary of the Interior.
Yes, he is. And so Trump is probably putting him at the table to keep his enemies closer. And if you watch any of these cabinet meetings, it's Bobby Kennedy Jr. is right next to Doug Burgum.
Yep. Ironic.
So should we switch over to the lead?
About the lead.
Okay.
Yes.
So I grew up in a EPA Superfund site which was designated as such when Mike Fahey was the mayor and my cousin Tess Fogarty was the mayor's PR person. And we got a fair amount of money from the feds to clean up all these backyards and do mitigation for all the lead that has basically filtered from 100 years of smelting out of the Missouri River inversion atmospheric conditions in the winter down into the soils in our backyards. And, we're all planting tomatoes and growing things in our backyards. And when I'm a kid, and it's like, well, that's all got lead in it anyway. But I started in earnest in researching lead and its effects on human behavior when I was chair of radiology at UND, as this was coming out in Omaha and during my residency, and I went straight up to UND, and then I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, a dermatologist in town, Bill Proct, who's also on the board of the Peregrine Foundation. And, this is a scientific body of wildlife scientists that are looking into what's basically hurting the fecundity or the birth rate of our great birds, including eagles. And it turns out that there's a lot of lead in the food chain for these great birds. And, we went through as a society of hunters long ago, we pulled the lead out of the shotgun shells, and now that's all steel. But there's still these great birds keep dying, especially the vultures in California, the condors, and it's because they have thin egg shells that are basically not well built because the mitochondrial substrate of the female bird is not really able to pull in enough energetics and construct a strong shell, because lead is fouling the mitochondrial energetics of the bird, which happens in humans as well. So I got a call from Proct, and he's just like, Ted, there's all this concern that high-powered rifles are basically unjacketed ones, the ones that are not jacketed with copper, are basically leaving a whole bunch of lead behind in the carcasses of deer and other big game. And, how can we prove this? And I was like, Bill, why don't we just take some donated venison and CT it, and we'll just throw it on the CT scanner at my hospital on a Sunday morning when I'm on call, because there's nothing that happens on a Sunday morning in Bismarck, North Dakota for trauma. So that's what we did, and I was just flabbergasted because we had 21-pound frozen packages of venison that were all donated, and every single package had at least one fragment of lead in it, and some of them had several fragments which were quite huge. I mean, like big enough that you would be expected to be able to see it with the naked eye. So we took those packages that had the biggest pieces, thawed them out, ran them over to the fluoro unit. So fluoroscopy is it's like a video of X-rays for the listeners. When you go into a radiology department and you get a barium enema or a barium swallow exam done, upper GI, and you're getting this videographic X-ray type of procedure so that we can see inside and see the movement of the stomach and see if you're refluxing and see if you've got a colon cancer. So fluoroscopy is kind of an older modality. It's one of the primary initial modalities of radiology. And so me and Bill were fluoroing this stuff, and I identified this quadrant of this one thawed piece of package of the formerly frozen venison, ground venison, and I pulled it out next to the sink, and I'm going through it with the tweezers, and I'm like, I know there's like a 3 millimeter piece of lead, but I couldn't feel it, I couldn't see it. I have this like chunk of lead that I know it's in this quadrant, and I'm like, look, we're gonna have to actively dissect this under fluoro to actually pull out a sample that we can send to a lab to prove that it's lead. And it was one of those things you would think that some sort of shrapnel from a lead-based bullet would be something that you could feel crunching in your teeth, but that's not true. It's actually so soft, and the thermodynamics of the lead fragment as it's flying through the meat of the deer, it's actually just like a rock going down a fast stream in Montana. It's actually getting very smooth edge, and this is all happening in milliseconds rather than months. But anyway, it took us a long time to actually pull out lead because we couldn't feel it, and it was in the midst of the gristle. It had no color distinction. It looked just like a little piece of fat. It looked like dirty fat. And so anyway, long story short, it's like we've all of us who are hunters have been eating lead fragments in our meat. And the bioactive side of it is not actually the fragment. It's the bioactive side of it is actually when the proteins in the muscle are getting stained by that high-powered projectile going through, remodeling itself, going from something more irregular edge to something smooth edge. It's labeling all of this meat with lead. So you have a lead amine complex in the blood trails. And so anybody who's a hunter out there, it's like, well, I'm really good at, I track all my blood trails. I'm telling you, it's not possible unless you have a CT scanner in the field with you. It is not possible to find every little fragment of lead in that carcass that you just harvest.
This is so fascinating because we've got ag people and hunters that listen to the show and just all the vicissitudes of these issues.
My take home, John, this is very important. My take home message, and it has been since I did this with Corn Answer back in 2007, the NRA tried to come after me as chair of radiology. There's all these people nationally that started descending into North Dakota politics, and I got messages from the governor of North Dakota and Minnesota that very week that we published this, that stop talking about this stuff, Fogarty. and I told them, I'm like, look, if this has got to be broadcast national. This has got to get into the national zeitgeist. And my Uncle Tommy Fogarty is actually the economics editor at USA Today. So if we're not going to get it out from North Dakota and Minnesota and Northern Plains gun country in the right way, then I'm just going to go to USA Today and I'm going to have my Uncle Tommy published. So that kind of put them on the spot. But I did get death threats, not real, but like people were in Minnesota in the Star Tribune were like, saying a lead pipe needs to go up that radiologist, what?
Well, at least they were consistent. They wanted it to be a lead pipe, correct?
Correct.
Hey, Doc, we're almost out of time. We're going to have to bring you back, but I want to just tease this. So we've been talking here about lead and buckshot, and let's stay on ballistics for a minute. I talked earlier about your ties to the Kennedy family. Can you talk about the JFK head x-rays and what you found?
Yeah. So first of all,
can you give us the elevator 120 seconds
elevator pitch. Okay.
Yes.
First of all the hunters listening to me, please switch over to Barnes X copper-based bullets and sight your guns in that way this fall. And then the next thing is, if everyone would go out and purchase a copy of the final analysis by Dr. Jerome Corsi and Dr. David Mantek. Mantek is a scholar radiologist from a prior generation. He's about 86 now, but he was allowed by the Kennedy family to go into the National Archives and do optical density measurements over 9 different times there. And he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Kennedy was basically in a turkey hunt. The thing that Bobby brought me in for was to verify the radiology forensics and also confirm that there was a very special bullet used that hit JFK in the forehead just to the right of midline under his brow line, and it contained mercury, and it has a characteristic liquid metal spray pattern across the meninges of the inner table of the skull that you can see on the x-rays. And the Bethesda naval pathologists basically created this x-ray. They manipulated these x-rays post-mortem to make it look like there was no shot that came from anywhere else but the Texas School Buck Depository, but they were unable to actually manipulate all of the fragments of both lead and mercury. All of that pattern was just sitting in these skull films, and they were unable to kind of pull it all off because he got shot by three different bullets, and
coming from three different directions.
Yes, so there was one shot that came in at a 45-degree angle frontal into the temporal bone, and it gave a characteristic keyhole pattern. And this is in forensic radiology in all the literature. And when you shoot a mammalian or human skull at a 45-degree angle, the tip of the bullet is going in and creating a circle. and you'll understand this, Dr. Pete, but then as the bullet starts to go through the marrow of the skull, it widens its track. And then as it goes out the intertable, there's a larger circle on the intertable side of the calvarium. And so you have, like, it looks like, geometrically, it looks like the old skeleton key holes in all the homes all across America from the 1920s. It's that kind of a keyhole trapezoid on the edge of a circle pattern.
Okay.
And that is the most definitive from a forensic radiology. That's the most definitive mark in the skull that he was shot from a frontal lateral approach at a 45-degree angle. That particular piece of the evidence is just undeniable. And I was brought in to kind of confirm this mercury hypothesis is theoretically valid.
And so did that shot come from somebody in the front seat of the car?
No. If you and there's pictures of this. There's actually a hole in the windshield of the open casket, so to speak, with wheels, and that vehicle was sent back to Detroit immediately, and they put a new windshield on it. There's actually evidence right there in the windshield that a shot got off from that bridge over the viaduct. Somebody shot him right through the windshield, and that particular bullet probably went in to the trachea and gave, and you'll see Kennedy on the film, on the image. It's in the book. He's making the St. Blaise sign of the cross over the neck right when that thing hit him in the trachea, and then that was also rejiggered in Bethesda to make it look like, well, that little hole was from the tracheostomy they tried in Dallas. That's completely untrue. That was a bullet hole.
Amazing stuff, guys. Ted, this has been just great to kind of do this whole panoply. It all ties in with we started with the glyphosate last week, and Dr. Pete, I think it's amazing. We're so much more cognizant of these environmental aspects. I mean, Pete, I can remember growing up as a kid, days before the Surgeon General gave the smoking warning, when everybody was smoking in classrooms in college, in restaurants, on television shows. Guys were doing martini lunches. I mean,
my mother-in-law was offered cigarettes by her obstetrician when she was pregnant with my wife. Seriously. Come on in, sit down, let's have a cigarette.
Oh my goodness.
1964. Yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah. Dr. Pete, listen to this. Listen to this one.
Okay.
My mom was carrying me. I was supposed to be born on Halloween. My dad and mom had a shotgun wedding. My dad was running on the Republican side for Douglas County attorney. And her OBGYN in October of 1970 said, I want you to drink a scotch every night so that this baby comes after the election in November.
Isn't that something?
And I was born November 6th, right after the election.
Drink a scotch.
Now, Pete, you're an OBGYN. How would that delay a labor?
Unless you're just hammered all the time and the uterus can't figure out what to do. It's the only thing I can think of. Isn't that something?
Maybe that happened in the last week. I don't know, but it was a big deal. Because
Pete,
it was in the World Herald. That these two got married in April, and then it's like there's an 8-pound baby coming right before the election.
Well, Dr. Pete, I've got a question for you. You said you could predict labor based on, what was it, the other?
Oh, and it was low pressure systems and a full moon. So my thing is, hey, find some labor and delivery units yesterday when there was a full moon. No, excuse me. Was it Friday? Friday was the full moon. It was the micro moon. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, full moon, low pressure system.
There's a lot of scientific literature. Dr. Pete, there's a lot of scientific literature that crosses over into the whole hyperbaric medicine world that I'm in on not just human females, but all mammals in the middle of a hurricane start dropping their babies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can see that. Yeah, I could absolutely see that. Yeah. It happens. Everybody, all these women, they break their water, and it's like, so cool. Well, it's almost like it's almost like we need 3 hours to kind of talk about some of this stuff in depth, but it's nice, Dr. Ted, it's nice hearing the glyphosate story kind of from your angle of things. I would love to, boy, it'd be great if someday if we could get Bobby Kennedy to talk about it on the radio. Wouldn't that be nice? He's awfully busy.
Yeah, he's a little too busy for us.
Yeah. But, yeah.
I imagine it's a proverbial. I imagine it's just cloak and dagger just to survive within that Trump administration. Ted, do you think Bobby's safe at this juncture in terms of his job?
Susie Wiles is running the show behind the scenes. That's, Trump's White House chief of staff, and she's totally big pharma, and she has been tasked with getting rid of Bobby.
Oh, why is that? I mean, she's like, he's a danger, because Bobby Kennedy's a danger to big pharma, obviously.
Yeah, and it may not be coming directly from Trump. It may be just like, hey, you got to get rid of this guy, and she's the chief of staff. All of these staffers in D.C., they actually run all of these Senate and congressional offices. And so it's the staffers who are basically ruining the MAHA and the MAGA movement. It literally comes down to the lifers and the staffers, and all these people in the CDC and the NIH, CMS and EPA, and it's all the lifers that are basically like, look, they've got their own mission to save their own careers. And so they're going to obfuscate and double back on anything that Trump and Kennedy are trying to do.
Yeah. It's guys, it's just it's amazing when you see how this, even at the state level, having been a former Iowa state legislator, if you knew how the sausage was really made, you would be appalled. Even at the state level, I can't imagine how cloak and dagger it is at the federal level. I just absolutely can't imagine. But Bobby's got a lot of moxie, and Trump has a great personal affection for Bobby, and we'll find out a lot after the midterms. Trump has already done a little bit of pre-positioning with Kristi Noem out and Pam Bondi out, and so it'll be fascinating to see what happens after the midterms, guys.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, we're going to take this. Pete, we got to have Dr. Ted back on again soon, but we want all of you to check out this podcast because our great engineer, Sean Torres, is going to put this up on podcast, and Pete and I are going to be back again next week. Pete, any final words? That alligator or crocodile didn't eat you alive last week. I was glad to see that you survived for another episode after you showed me that gargantuan reptile outside your residence.
You just never know where they're going to pop up. You just don't ever know. All of a sudden, there they are.
Is that like 10, 13 foot long? That thing was huge.
That thing was at least 10 feet long. It was huge.
Oh, my goodness.
Tastes like
Dad, we have tornadoes.
That's good meat.
Good meat.
Highest best use is shoes. So anyway, what I want to know is if during Lent that counts as fish or if that's still considered red meat.
That's a great one for the new Pope. Yes, get the Chicagoan on that one.
Well, I'm sure. That's it. Southside Bob. Yeah, he'll answer that one for us.
Yeah, because I've been trying to get baby alligator tails into the College World Series for about a decade now under hyperbaric conditions.
Guys, hey, we'll talk some baseball next time too. For our special guest, Dr. Ted Fogarty, and for the great one, Dr. Peter W. Tinsman, and say hi to the lovely and gracious Heather for us, as the lovely and gracious Deborah says hi to both of you two guys who she knows so well and is known for so long, the lovely and gracious Deborah. This is John Jacobson for Pete Tinsman, Ted Fogarty, and Sean Torres saying it's been great to be with you. Grab the podcast on KOFO 1220, and until we meet again, so long.